Mike Fossum and Sellers exiting the Quest airlock. Their first task being some work on the mobile transporter, which is a movable cart on the space station's lengthy truss segment, and that task was completed successfully.
The Inco takes us back to Mission Control Houston.
Back in December, a separate blade blacker, or blade rather, had inadvertently cut one of the cables that's required to provide power and data for that cart. That was one of two cables, and this activity this morning was to install a blade blacker to prevent such another occurrence, and that was completed without incident. They went on to reroute that cable back through that device, which had been previously maneuvered outside of that cable, the cutter, just to make sure that it did not occur again, but that all configured correctly at this time. They then went on to the second primary task for the spacewalk, and that being some exercises that they were doing at the end of the robotic arm. There was a special 50-foot extension attached to the end of the robotic arm, at the first task being Pierce Sellers attaching himself to the end of that boom and doing some simulated movements that would replicate those that would be done for an inspection or repair activity. He was then joined by Mike Fossum on the end of the boom, and they went on to do some additional movements, again to test how that arm and boom would behave with such movements going on at the end. This was the first time such an activity was attempted, and that all went very well. In fact, the loading all under or less than predicted. So everyone thus far very optimistic that it could indeed be a feasible platform for those inspections or repair activities if it were ever needed on a subsequent shuttle flight.
Back to downlink once again. Notice the heavy increase in snow.
The spacewalk was a success, and although it did run a little long, but finished up in 7.5 hours. Meanwhile, other crew members on board, including the Expedition 13 crew of Mando Pablo Vinogradov and flight engineer Tomas Ryder, carried on with the continued transfer activities of unloading the MPLM, or the multi-purpose logistics module. They had removed that from the space shuttle's payload bay, attaching it to the International Space Station, and continuing to unload that over the next few days. But some of the larger items were successfully transferred today. Included in that the -80 lab freezer, which is a very large freezer that will be used for critical lab freezer capability on the International Space Station. It will be used to maintain scientific samples and experiments. Also transferred was the oxygen generation system that will add to that capability on the International Space Station. Both of those items, some of the larger items in the cargo transfer.
This is where the Inco begins to play with the camera. The flood lamp on the robotic arm is just out of the field of view to the right. As the camera is panned to the right, circular lens flares are produced. These bear some superficial resemblance to the anomaly, but are definitely not the same. Do you suppose that the purpose here is to provide plausible deniability for the anomaly we just saw moments ago? I suspect that the Inco realized that something got past him. He cut off the original feed, taking us back to Houston. When he returned us to the payload bay camera, the snowy mask had been increased, and then he gives us these lens flare games. Why do you think he did this? I can see no logical reason for toying with the camera this way myself. It serves no legitimate purpose and shows nothing of interest to the public. Further proof that the snowy mask you see is an overlay on the signal after it comes down from the shuttle, but before it's sent out to the public is seen at the upper right corner. Notice that the NASA logo is covered with snow? If the snow came with the downlink, that logo would be crystal clear. Think about it.